following contains explicit language and possibly triggering content. Listener discretion is advised. Thank you for joining me on the Black Moment podcast, where we talk to people about their life-changing stories. If you want to submit your own, you can go to theblackmomentpodcast.com, and I'll give you a little more info about that at the end of this show. So today's guest is Immanuel, and he's going to talk about his Black moment and how he overcame that. So tell us a little bit about who you were and what your life looked like in the events leading up to your Black moment.
Let's see. So when I was born, my birth mother was 16 when she gave birth. And then a little over a year later, she had my brother. And we stayed with her until we were taken from her by CPS. And our birth father was, very much in and out of the picture. He was in no way a reliable father figure. He was on and off meth. And actually, to come to find out, he still is on and off meth to this day. I guess he stopped for a long period of time, but went back to it. So I think for me, my sort of Black moment was, I think that day in court. My brother and I were taken from our birth mother by CPS when the school saw on a regular basis we were coming to school with, a lot of bruises, a lot of injuries and stuff like that weren't really being explained. And that went beyond, like kids being kids. We got taken out of school one day. They called us to the office. A police officer was there. He took us. We got placed into essentially an orphanage. They call them group homes now, though. So we were placed in one of those for a bit, and fast forward a year later, and the judge gave our mother, who would sit back and watch our stepdad just beat the living shit out of us, many times unconscious, or he had this one thing he really liked to do where he'd take the back of our head, slam it into a wall, and then sort of just grind our foreheads into it. So the judge gave her a choice. He said, you can either have your husband or your sons. You can't have both. And she actually took a moment. She considered it. So she actually thought about it and played it out in her head. And she looked at us, and then she looked back at the judge, and she said, I'd rather have my husband. So I think for me, that was sort of the start of my Black moment, if not my Black moment. Because I feel like there were a lot of different times in my childhood that were very, I guess I would say, beginnings of developing who I would become as a person. And sort of, really contributing to my values and my beliefs, and sort of, but that day in court, she legally had given up all rights. We were already wardens of the state. So now she had no rights to us whatsoever. So we waited around for a bit until our biological grandmother came and rescued us. And that in itself ended up being just so much worse than the situation before. But I do think that day in court was probably that Black moment.
How did that feel, having your mom choose your dad?
It was interesting because it wasn't, she was very much the one in the sense on trial, but we were the ones given the sentence. So it's, it's an interesting thing to be able to look back on. And just one of the things I've really had to come to terms with is, as you grow older, when you're a child, or when you're growing up, you have these definitive bad guys and good guys, and people who are supposed to be your good guys. So like your mother or your father and people like that who are supposed to be your safe places, you realize are bad guys, at least to you in that time. Not to excuse her in any way, shape, or form, but as you grow older, you do, and you learn more about, your tormentors' histories, and you find out they have torment. So she was actually raped and sexually abused by her birth father when she was a child. And this is somebody who she still, even to this day, has a relationship with. They've, sort of moved on and accepted that that's what their living was like. But her not breaking free of that, or trying to really establish a healthier environment for herself, and allowing this pervert to just continue to be really have a prominent role in her life, obviously really twisted her. And she chose to, instead of break cycles, whether she continued the same cycle of abuse or not, she herself wasn't the abuser, but she permitted the abuse. So there's a, there is a, it's obviously not a gray area. It is complete. She was in the wrong. However, it's something that's hard to really accept, that you have to realize is that everybody is human, and our tormentors do have tormentors of their own that sort of lead into them becoming these figures and these people, and to do the things that they do. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, because they do always ask, especially as a kid, you ask yourself why, like, why me? Like, and it really did set into stone this huge lack of self-worth. If even my own mom can look at me and say I'd rather have my husband, it's like, damn, am I really that expendable? And then so, whereas I sort of took it, I responded in a way of like, okay, fuck that, I don't need anybody ever. And in some situations, even today, I can acknowledge I have I always kind of like, it's like an internal joke with myself. I'm like, maybe I'm just like a really high functioning sociopath, that like I can just turn off some emotions for people. I'm like, all right, we're done. Like, that's it. Nope. And it's simple as that. I don't have to have a yelling bout or anything like that. But it did, create something that I would say isn't particularly healthy. Whereas in my brother, he very much continued to seek that love and affection in anyone that he possibly could, which is why later on in life, he actually went back to our birth mother. And then he was too young at that stage when we were being abused to really fully remember it. So for him, he didn't fully remember it. And then so she started feeding into his head when he was older that it never happened. And then so that created a divide within him and I, because I'm like, how do you, for me, one, like, how do you not remember that? Okay. And which is, I understand he could have repressed it. He's also younger. His memory is not fully, the capabilities his mind has to fully retain memories isn't great to start off with. And she was also using drugs when she was pregnant with him, so he's already got, like, if everybody's like 6 cylinders, he's 5. And that's not to say that he's not intelligent in some ways. He's just not everything clicks the way I think it should in a normal functioning human being. But you find the contrast in how people will develop after that. And so I think that was probably my brother's black moment too. And sadly, it continued to be a weight on him, that, it's like he always had these things tied to his feet that just, he had the key for the lock. He just never used it. So I think that was, yeah.
Did you both live with your grandma?
We did. However, so our grandmother, she found out that if you adopted kids who either have or develop disabilities, you can get more money from the state for it, because, and that's what she wanted. So my brother was very much acting out. And so she found a way to still have legal custody, therefore still be getting the money from the state for him, but she put him in and out of boys' homes. And then while he was being put in and out of boys' homes, I was left alone with her. We were both, we didn't have medical conditions. We had PTSD and stuff like that, but in a sense of medical conditions other than that, him with maybe a learning disability and things like that, there was nothing there. But she, in her pursuit of getting more financial reward, she created disabilities. She started to over medicate us. And, she started to, convince doctors that we had these things going on at home, and they just weren't seeing them in the office when we brought to them. So they, of course, thinking this woman has the best interest at heart for us, believed her. And they started prescribing very heavy narcotics for me. And then for him, my brother, they started prescribing other things. And with the amount of medications we were given, he did legitimately develop more mental disabilities, and I developed physical disabilities. So she got what she wanted, and they became things that we both have to deal with to this day. I think that dependence on those drugs definitely sparked my brother's desire to search other substances, and now he is an off and on drug addict. So I think she definitely really set the stage for him to do that. And for me, she gifted me a very lovely physical condition that for years doctors really just could not figure out what it was. It was kind of like a seizure, but it wasn't. So my body muscles would just convulse over and over again. There'd be so much pressure building up in my body that my blood vessels would burst. So underneath my skin, it looked like just hickeys, because underneath they're just exploding. And the blood vessels in my nose would always burst. So I just have, you know, literally I'd wake up in a pool of my own blood, and it was, agonizing. I actually I only attended high school, I found out, for about 2 years physically. The rest of it was all homeschool because of these conditions. And so, but during all this time as well, while my brother was in and out of boys' homes, when he wasn't there, she was, molesting me.
How old were you guys at this time?
Well, this was going on between the ages of, like, for me, 11 to about 15, when the molestation itself was going on. The over medication I didn't really kick that and realize what she was doing until I was about 16, 17. And I guess I just sort of clicked one day, like, maybe all these things aren't working. Maybe all these meds, why am I taking them if they're not helping? So I decided to, I got super, super into exercising. I would wake up, I always took a bus to school and stuff like that. I would wake up at like 5:30 in the morning, start going on an 8-mile run at 6 o'clock, come back, get ready for school, take the bus and head out. And then afterwards, I dedicated myself to my schoolwork because I had so much to make up for missing those years. And I ended up I would do, like, I think it, so when I was 19, I got stabbed in the stomach. So the combined trauma from that being stabbed, and then also the physical trauma from the condition, my brain started to shut down and I got retrograde amnesia. So a lot of this stuff is things been forced to remember, or I've had to do research from other people in my life at the time. And I wrote myself journals, because when I first lost my memory, I lost about 5 months. And then the doctor said, you could lose more. So I got super, super paranoid, and I started writing as much as I could about my life. And I woke up the day after my 19th birthday and I did not know who I was. So that's why when I refer to it, I'm like, to my understanding, or I learned, or I found out, that's what I'm referring to. I found out I ended up doing like 3,000 crunches a night, and, like, 1,000 push-ups and like 700. So I mean, like, I went all out. I was doing an unhealthy amount of exercise, which really at that point, it just becomes, in the long run, you're probably just hurting your body than benefiting it. But I completely got rid of every single medication I was on. And then my grandmother decided that she didn't like that I was starting to be more coherent and more, I was really recognizing the level of toxicity that she possessed, and the influence that she had over not only my life, but my brother's life, and the horrible things she was doing. So she tried to convince my doctor to have I guess it was like she labeled it as like just a routine physical or something. But when I got in there, he apparently told me, yeah, I don't know why she told you that, because it's not. She wanted me to tell you that you need to go back on your meds. And he's like, but I'm looking at you. And we talked for a little bit. He's like, you don't need them. So after that, she kicked me out because I wouldn't go back on the meds. So I bounced around to my uncle's for a bit, and then to a girl I was dating with at the time in high school. Her mother sort of took me in as her own, and so I stayed with them for a good while.
Where was your brother? Or when did he leave?
So After high school, I got my grades up and I ended up doing so well that I ended up getting accepted to the University of Maui for mechanical engineering. And then, it was all paid for, everything, because I had no fucking money. So my academics were enough that it was, they were like, well, the financial aid you'll have will cover it and the school will cover the rest or something like that. So I had enough money in my, bank account to pay for a plane ticket out there. I had a friend who'd moved out there. She said she'd, let me stay there for a while until I got on my feet and start going to school or whatever, and we'd figure that out. And so I went. And then 2 days into it, I was there in Maui for a grand total of 5 days. Hadn't even started school yet. It was like 2 weeks before school started. 2 days in, my brother calls me and says, "Hey, I found a way I can get out, but I need you to get me out." So it was that, okay, do I stay and sort of reward myself for all the hard work that I've had to do for cramming 4 years of schooling into 2 years and really try to have the best opportunity to change my life? Or do I go back and don't have enough money for a plane ticket back and get him out? So with where I'm at now in life, I'm happy in the long run that that's the choice I made. But I think at that time it was very naive. I went back and he said, he had been talking to somebody. They were going to let him stay with them for however long he needed. I'm like, that's awesome. So I drove him to the place and, I went and checked him out. And then they were like, yeah, we're just going away for the weekend. We never went back. And checked him out. And we drive up to the house. They walk out and it's my fucking mom. And I remember just looking at him. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? This was your solution. The person who put us into this is your saving grace. And that was the big rift for my brother and I in our relationship. It was, I had given up this future and you chose to, with this gift that I was, giving him by me giving this up, that's what he chose to do with that. And so that really, for all the hurts and pains that we had been through, he chose to go back with her. And I'm like, was that not a hard enough lesson to learn when we were so young that you decided, let me give her another shot? I think at the end of the day, people can generally be redeemed. I think there are some people who do go too far and have done too horrendous of things that you should still carry the label of the things that you've done. Like if somebody goes around being a mass rapist and they're afterwards are like, I'm sorry, now I run a soup kitchen and do all these things or whatever. It's like, that's cool that you're putting good into the world. You're still going to fucking carry the title of being a rapist. That is your burden to bear because the memories and the trauma that you have others bearing because of your choices, as long as they hurt, that's how long you're going to hurt. That's how long you're going to, have that mantle. So for me, I was really pissed off. I'm like, he made the argument of, well, she treats our other siblings really good because when we were with our stepdad and our birth mom, when they were together, they ended up having 2 kids of their own. So we were very much the black sheep. And to our understanding, never beat them. So, to her credit in whatever manner I would give it to her, she was a good mom to them apparently. But I'm like, yes, but you're using an example of other people that she was a good mom to. She was already a bad mom to you. It's not like she has no status and she lost us when we were babies because we were taken, or, she was an addict and just couldn't, it was better off for us that we weren't with her. She literally chose while we were like 9, 10. I'm like, she chose. That was in her control. And then, funnily enough, like 2 years after she made that choice, she ended up getting a divorce with him. So it's like, even then, she can't look back and say, well, like it was worth it, or, I did what I had to do and my husband and I are now stronger for it, blah, blah. It's like, you guys got fucking divorced. For my brother and I, that was definitely, that's definitely the divide that we had. And I did hold, I think, probably an unfair amount of anger towards him for that. And because in my mind, I'm like, I raised you. Like, I gave up my childhood to be, protector. Because, even when I was young, I have this memory. My stepdad was just beating the shit out of my brother. He did something. I don't really quite remember what. And I couldn't, for the life of me, I didn't know what to do. So I'm like, I just have to stop it no matter what. So I ran to our bathroom and I actually looked it up afterwards because I'm like, I don't, it was an interesting detail, but there was this like little, almost transparent green bar of soap in the shower. And it had this little bust of a Skywalker in his pod, of Anakin Skywalker in his pod racer helmet from episode 1. And I looked it up online. I'm like, damn, yeah, that's it. And I grabbed it and I just chucked it at the bathroom mirror. And I knew that would be loud enough and it would be enough damage that all that anger and rage would get transferred onto me. And so I was pissed. I'm like, I did everything I could for you. I put my life at stake for you. I put my own well-being. I put your own well-being constantly above my own. And in the end, this is what you do with how hard I've fought. Even me coming back from being able to go to a university and it being paid for, like, this is what you're doing with that. That was, it's interesting to see the contrast of how people can handle similar situations. And in some regard, like, ours was different on certain levels. He wasn't sexually abused like I was, but I also wasn't put in and out of boys' homes. And there's definitely different kinds of abuse that goes on in there. You put a bunch of hormonal boys together who have no real bond together and they're just all the fucking troublemakers. Shit's gonna happen. They're gonna hurt each other. And so we've definitely had varying degrees of abuse after that we didn't share. But it really made me realize that there's an interesting bond that can be formed. And I think this is kind of why, like, people who have troubled pasts can kind of like pinpoint other people and you're like, you're my new fucking best friend, because like you understand, like you really, there's a bittersweet power, I would say, in the type of camaraderie that you can have with someone who has similar traumas to your own. Yeah, it's funny because it really does happen. Because I met this, I used to go to Barnes and Noble a lot, and there was this one girl who worked there, and I'd always ask her, like, hey, where's this book? She'd always help me out. And over time, we like started talking about what books we were into and things like that. She asked me out for coffee one day. We went and had coffee, and then we started talking about each other's lives, and we were like, oh shit. I think we just became best friends. Like, and so it was, it's always interesting, but it's kind of scary to see the contrast that people can take. I did try to reconnect with my birth mother after, the memory loss and all that. And she said something that was interesting. She said, she had these tattoos on her, and funnily enough, 2 of them were actually representations for my brother and I, which is kind of like that in itself too is like, was hard for me to accept, because it's like, you fucking threw us away and yet we're important enough to mark your body. But she had a sun and a moon, and she said, you guys were always just so different. You were the quiet thinker, and your brother was just the loud, crazy one, does whatever comes to mind. And then I realized, when she said that, it really hit me that my brother and I really are just 2 sides of the same coin. Our origins up to that black moment are very much the same. Now, there are differences after that lead to other, I would say, in storytelling, novels and writing, it's, I do know a bit about this because I'm an aspiring graphic novel writer. So I have to study structures of story and everything like that. So it's very much a part of the hero's journey to have that inciting incident, that defining moment that leads the protagonist onto the road that they essentially become, whether it be their own hero or the hero of someone else. In some shape or form, it's their road to becoming a hero. And I think, that day in court was definitely our road to figuring out who we wanted to become. You know, my brother just, I think, didn't want to hurt people anymore. So he became this over loving person and over accepting person, despite what people would believe. And I became this very angry person this angry child who just did not want to have to deal with the world's shit anymore. And I do genuinely believe that the only reason why I sort of like didn't fight back sooner when it came to my birth grandmother is we were very much fed this, notion that she rescued us. We owed her. So, there was that, but also, I was being drugged up a lot. So that definitely impaired my ability to think. But it's funny that once all of that was out of my system, all those drugs, I think that anger in that was buried away really came back. And I decided to do things that were productive with it. My now fiance, she used to be in a very, she used to have a domestic violent relationship with son's birth father. And the most horrible things in that guy's life were his mom left him when he was a kid. Now, even then, he's had a stepmom who's been there since he was a fucking child. But he uses this notion of like, well, I didn't have a mom, so I like to do all this stuff, like it to be the root of why he, his excuses of like, why he beat her or why he beat his son or all these things. It's like, I could use every excuse under the sun, but that's not a viable reason as to why it would be okay for me to become an abuser. And that does happen a lot, sadly, because, people who are abused more often than not do become abusers. It really does take a lot of fucking hard work. It really does. It takes a lot of hard work to break that cycle, to shed that skin, and to, it really makes me think of that whole Nietzsche, looking into the abyss, and it looks back. And it's very true, because I think people who have been abused, you kind of have to accept you're more susceptible to becoming an abuser. You fall into the same patterns. It's what happened to you. So it's kind of you are relaying that, you're putting it back into the world. So you really have to go against what you are taught, because there is, I think everybody's, a combination between nature and nurture. I don't think it's any one over the other. I think some people are born more naturally angry, or maybe some people are born more naturally nice, but definitely the conditions that you're born into and raised, they definitely help shape that. And they help you grow in areas that, it's like a plant, I can do what I want with the plant, but then I get to, take that wire and shape it. I think the conditions that you live in, and, that nurture definitely helps shape that. So to go against your own nurture is hard. I did recognize that my brother really and I are just two sides of the same coin. We just took two different roads. We took our traumas and decided to do different things with it, right now. And, I'm trying to do what I can to take really any wisdom or positivity from my life and sort of share it with others. And because, like I said before, there really is a bittersweet. There's a very much a bittersweetness to finding people who have trauma like you and being able to connect over it, because, you don't want anybody to have gone through similar things like you. But when you find it, it's nice because you're able to connect. Somebody's able to understand on that level, and for me personally, that's kind of why that one-on-one therapy never worked for me. Cause I know I'm like, they're talking, they're very knowledgeable, they went to school, they're very educated, they're very intelligent people. However, I know that this is just knowledge to them. It's not experience. It's not wisdom, and I genuinely needed to speak to somebody who understands on that type of level, not somebody I'm talking to, but somebody I'm talking with. So yeah. And
so when you got amnesia, how long did that last? What did your road to recovery look like?
So I've only got about, 35, a little bit more memories from that time. It doesn't accumulate to more than like, 30 minutes. That definitely obviously brings on its own struggles, because I had to essentially, in some ways, sort of with the memories and things like that, I had to get re-traumatized. And because I knew about these things, but I didn't remember it. I knew what my mom said. I didn't remember it. So I remember I had, my girlfriend at the time, she was driving, and I had this, I get this like this weird fog in my head, and it's a very particular type of fog. It's nothing else I've ever felt compares to it. Right? And so I know exactly what it is. So if I'm doing something, I can be like, oh shit, I need to like step aside. And my vision, like, if you have like an ocular view of something, the dark edges of the picture are kind of, there's the dark corners of the picture to make it circular and make it ocular. It starts to get like that. And so everything like from the edges of my, my peripheral vision starts to fade until it goes all the way. And then I get like zapped back to that moment. And it's really odd because it's like the smell, the AC blowing into the room on my cheek. I can, it's more than just like remembering. It's like I'm like reliving it, and I am not aware of everything else that's around me. And it's very split. It happens for just a few seconds, but afterwards it's that wave of emotion. Like I just bawled my eyes out when I remembered that court day, because I remembered, but I relived it. And so, and I think that's kind of a fear as well, is I don't know what else is tucked away. The sexual abuse actually for my grandmother, that was something I opted out from writing in my journals. I made a conscious decision to say, you know what, if I can live without this, I'd rather live without it. So to then be forced to relive it and remember it, nature and my mind going against the gift I was trying to give myself, was very difficult. It was very hard. I didn't understand. I wasn't sure if it was real. And I think that was probably one of the biggest things too, is trying to figure out if these things that I remember, I'm like, are these real? And so many of the memories I've gotten lined up with other things that I've written about, and, I've gotten a handful of the sexual abuse. I'm like, no, that happened, sadly. That's something I really, really struggle with today still, is the amnesia. I have no problem making new memories. So anything after, August 26, 2012, I remember very well. It's stuff before that day, the 26th and after. It's hard because it's like, you start to get in your own head early on. I refer to that moment as the moment I woke up, because that's the first thing I remember doing. The very first thing I remember doing was waking up. So I refer it to as waking up, and it's just something that's sort of stuck whenever I talk about that moment, which is interesting because in my new life, that's sort of my black moment. Mm-hmm. I get another one under my belt, I guess. So I for a long time, like my name back then was Manuel, and when I woke up, it didn't feel right. So I eventually did change it to Immanuel, and it's something so simple enough that people who knew me before can make a simple adjustment to the way a name. But it definitely felt more like me. But it took years before I was like, that was my life. To me, it was like, I had this image of Manuel, and it was very much, like that strength that he had, that perseverance and that will isn't mine. That's his. And anything that is mine, it's a gift that I've been given that I don't deserve, because he's the one who went through it. And it wasn't until probably like a year and a half ago that it like, I had this flicker in my mind, and it was that memory stuff coming back, and it was something so simple. And I don't know why my brain decided that this was important enough, to even survive the amnesia, that it was something I remember. But I was writing a letter, I think it was like for school or something, but it started out with "I'm Manuel," and it was probably a letter to somebody or something. But I like pieced it together, and I was like, holy shit, like my new name spells out "I'm Manuel."
Cool.
And it was this huge revelation for me that, for whatever reason, held so much weight in it, that I like acknowledge. I'm like, no, that was me. Like, that's my life. That's my story. That's, the strength that I do have that survived the amnesia and stuff like that, that's mine. Just like the traumas and the pains are, just like those tears, that anger, that's all mine. And it wasn't really until something so simple as that like really, because before that memory, I dealt with this a lot. I still struggle with it now from time to time, but you feel like an empty husk. You feel like a human husk. Like I'm always envious of people when they have can have a normal conversation of like one icebreaker. One of my classes was, what was your dream job when you were little? I had to pass because I didn't know. I don't know what my favorite TV show was as a kid. I don't know my favorite superhero, any of that. And so I still struggle with it a lot. And it's something I do have to, battle my own mind against. And it's like, was I so worthless, even to life, the universe, whatever God may be out there, that I'm not even worthy enough to have my own memories? I'm so worthless that I am just a living, breathing husk, that there's nothing inside. It's just what you see with what you get. And that's something I still struggle with. So, I think I've adjusted, and to the best of my ability, I know that there's a lot of things with the amnesia that I could definitely use help on. But that's something that I've met 2 people with retrograde amnesia, but it's nothing more than like 6 months. For me, it's 19 years, and I get bits and pieces back from time to time. That was in 2012. So it's now 2020. It's been 8 years, and I have like 30 to 40 memories. That's hard to swallow. And that means it'll be the day after my 36th birthday. No, my 38th birthday, that I will officially have more than half of my life's memories. And that fucking sucks. It really sucks. You always feel like you're at a disadvantage. And I do hope again, it'll be a bittersweet thing, because I never want anybody to have to experience this, but it'll be interesting. And I do hope to find somebody who's had it to the degree that I do, that I can speak with, so I can actually, find somebody who understands. Because there is something very scary in walking past a mirror and not recognizing, legitimately not knowing what you look like, or not recognizing the sound of your own voice. Like, people can use the phrase, I looked into the mirror and I didn't know who I was looking at. I legitimately very literally looked into a mirror and did not know who I was looking at. I would like to know the story behind all my scars. My ex and I counted once, and I have like over 50. And I'm like, I want to know what this one on my knee's from. I want to know what this one on my chest is from, what this, whether I want to be able to remember that or not, maybe that's a different story. And I do get asked that a lot is, are you happy that you forgot? I can't really give a definitive answer for that, because to some degree, I'm happy about it. I'm happy that I don't remember those things. And for a short while, I didn't have to remember, the sexual abuse. Your memories are definitely your motivations and your drive to becoming who you wanted to be. And I didn't know who I wanted to be anymore. And it's interesting too, because even with memory loss, you find that there are things that are core values to yourself that even survive a loss of memory, which was super interesting. People I talked to, they were like, no, these parts of you are still the same. So it's interesting that those things in your life have affected you so much that I can testify that even if you lose your memories, the things that have happened to you and help create who you are as a person, and the choices you've made to become who you want to be or who you are, become fundamental, memory or not. But it sucked to have to realize that I don't have answers to, why am I like this? Why do I handle situations like this? I don't remember. So to some degree, I'm happy I forgot, but to others, I hate it.
So what hope do you hold on to now? What motivates you?
Well, my dream is to just, really simple, to be a husband and a dad. With this new relationship, I definitely, I have that. It's been about a year and a half. I've been with my fiance. Before that, I was in a relationship on and off for about 6 years. We got married, only lasted marriage for about 6 months. It was a very emotionally abusive relationship. And I just wasn't, I didn't, I didn't have enough self-worth to leave it, to know that the way I was being treated was wrong. Like I actually, the weekend I went to propose to my ex-wife, my dad sat down with me to talk about it. I got taken in by this couple after my amnesia. So he's my dad. And he sat down with me and he asked me about it. And I told him, and it was sad that I couldn't recognize it even then. I told him like, yeah, I'm going to, because I know that, it's okay to marry her because I know I don't deserve any better. He said as much as he could, but after the divorce and things like that, and we talked more, he's like, that broke my heart to like legitimately see you make such a huge life decision. And a main motivating factor why you were okay with it was because you didn't believe you deserved any better. So one day I was just done. I'm like, I can't do this shit anymore. And I'm like, I'm sorry that I didn't come to this realization before we actually got married, but you treat me fucking horribly and I'm done. Like I've given you chance after chance. You've done horrible things. I'm gone. And so I did. And then in that time, we actually found out we had gotten pregnant. But when we found out we got pregnant, when she found out, she had a miscarriage. So she then lied to me about, miscarriages happen. 1 in 4 pregnancies end up in miscarriages, which is horrible. I think people do need to realize and recognize that this taboo subject needs to be talked about more because it affects more people than we realize. But she lied to me and told me that the doctor told her that the miscarriage happened because of the stress I was putting on her because was leaving. And so I then was carrying around this horrible notion that I had inadvertently killed my own child, something that I had been striving for so long as I wanted to be a father. But really, I think it was her last attempt to really just dig into me and try to cut me down. She's like, what does he want most? What can I fucking take away right at the second of giving it to him? I can take it away. It's that. Because come to find out, after that was the darkest time in my life. Even the amnesia doesn't compare to where I was then. So I had a failed suicide attempt, which even with that, you're kind of like, damn, I couldn't even do that. Right. But, I talked to doctors about it more because, I was forced to, speak to a lot of mental health professionals and things like that. And I told them about that. They're like, you realize that's not a thing, right? Like emotions don't actually, like, there are women who give birth in the middle of war. Like emotional pain and sadness don't cause miscarriages. Like they can be harmful to the baby's health, sure, but not to the degree that like the baby dies. And like come to find out, Mayo Clinic, who's like one of the leading researchers in the States of medicine and everything under the sun with that, they've made official statements saying there is no evidence whatsoever that says miscarriages are caused by these things. And I'm like, damn. So now that, to give a long answer to your question, what I strive for now is that, I do have a healthy relationship with someone, and, she already had a son. So I've been lucky enough to, jump into being a dad for a 5-year-old, which has been awesome. So what gives me hope is that while I was given this, these vile creatures for family, I get to create my own. And we do have the ability to create our own families. It doesn't matter who we come from. You can come from the most vile and horrible people in the world, but you can choose to leave, and at some point in your life, you do become responsible for who you allow in and out of your life. Children don't have that luxury, but as an adult, I do. So you have to be very firm with those choices. You have to make sure you're making the right choice of people who you let into your life and things like that. So that's what gives me hope, is that I get to make my own family. I get to make my relationships as healthy as they possibly can.
You get to break the cycle.
Yeah, I do. I get to break the cycle. And I think for me, it's kind of, I think a charge for people who've been abused, it's an unfair charge, I would say, because you have to do more than the standard person who has not been abused. But it becomes your charge that you now need to put into the world not only the good you can offer, but the good you also were not given. Because you know what it's like, and you need to fill that gap. You need to fill that hole. You need to replace that hate in the world with love, kindness and generosity. And now I'm being given the opportunity to be the stepdad that I would have wanted. And where I'm at, how I handle situations, you obviously have to, if he's a 5-year-old boy, I could discipline him, plenty of times. I've never yelled at him. I've never laid a hand on him. There's custody issues with even the state right now before him because his dad smacked him. And it's like, the worst he's been through is his mom left. It's like, that's not like, I get, yeah, that hurts. That'll hurt you. Trust me, I understand that. But that's not, even then, that is bare minimum reasons to go on to smack children, like, or to abuse anybody. Like, that's not, in the grand scheme of things, it's really not a lot that happened to him. So that's my hope, is that I do get to make my own family. And one of the phrases that I absolutely fucking hate is the whole bullshit of, blood is thicker than water, because it just gives people an excuse to, it sets up this horrible ideology that your blood relatives have to stay in your life or can be permitted to do anything to you because of your blood relatives. Which, the phrase pisses me off so much is because it's a muddied down version of a phrase that is actually saying the exact opposite. The original saying is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. So it's your bond that you've made with this person, your blood of a covenant, your oath to them is stronger than your biological relations. I'm like, how is it this phrase has literally gotten so fucking twisted? It is now a supporting phrase to abusers to say the exact opposite of what its original intent was. So whenever I hear that, and actually, like, a while back, I reconnected with my birth uncle, and he's just fucking narcissistic. But, I talked with his son, and his son talked about, he's like, yeah, I want to get like a matching tattoo with my dad one day. I'm like, what do you want to get? He's like, I want to get blood is thicker than water. And again, that's a phrase his dad uses because his dad's emotionally abusive. And so that's his kind of, hook in. And I laughed, and I felt like a dick, but I laughed. And he's like, what? I'm like, that's not the phrase, dude. Like, and I told him the real one. He's like, and his dad kind of just sat there and said nothing. But I'm like, you literally want to get a phrase tattooed on you that actually its original meaning means the exact opposite. Because just because somebody's your parent or any blood relative doesn't give them fucking permission to be in your life if they're assholes.
It's better saying. We need to bring that saying back.
Yeah, we really, really do. Because I've seen horrible people continue to be permitted into someone's life because of this ideology that blood is thicker than water. It holds no grounds for why someone should be given the luxury of having someone in their life, because that is a reward. And I think people do, especially if you've been abused, you have a low sense of self-worth, and you think, well, I'm nothing special, so why should I think, oh, I'm a blessing if you have me in your life like that? And even then, that's just kind of cocky. But you do have to realize, like, you have good to offer, and you can be acquaintances and friends to as many people as you want, but really you only have so much time to spend genuine quality time with people. And I would rather spend it with people who genuinely make me feel good about myself than with people who don't, because then I'm just wasting my fucking time, and essentially then I'm wasting my life. And I have too much of my life that I need to make up for not remembering that I'm not going to waste my fucking time. I need to make good memories and not try to, continue this cycle of having bad memories that life has so graciously gifted me. We do all have these inciting incidences in our lives, these black moments that do sort of define us. And whether we like them or not, they do define us, and they do start our life. They start our hero's journey. You know, whether it becomes a comedy or a tragedy, that's kind of up to us to a certain degree. Because there are things out of our control. You know, you get fucking stabbed to death or something, or shot or T-boned in a car. It's not really your choice. But more often than not, as an adult, when you start fully making decisions on your life, there are more responsibilities than people would like to acknowledge that are theirs. You know, it's been nice, and you are definitely doing something that I definitely want to do as well, which is let people know they're not alone. There has been plenty of pain in the world to go around, to make sure that no one genuinely feels alone in what they're suffering and going through.
I think this is a great time to stop. That was
Cool.
Thank you so much for sharing everything.
Oh yeah, of course.
And good luck to you and your fiance and her kid.
Thank you. Yeah.
If you want to follow Immanuel, you can on TikTok. His handle is @theamnesiac. Check the episode's description for the spelling. If you have a story you want to share, go to our website, theblackmomentpodcast.com. You can record a little soundbite on your phone, send us that MP3, email it in, send it to our Dropbox. We can schedule a Zoom interview like we just did with this episode. Just tell us who you were before, what your black moment was, and how your life was like afterwards. Were you in an accident? Did you have a severe illness? Survive a natural disaster? Find your faith? Lose your faith? Other than that, follow us, rate us, review us. Just know that no matter how big or how small, your story matters.